Aristotle, On Politics, Book 3, Part 1. He who would inquire into the essence and attributes of various kinds of governments must first of all determine what is a state. At present, this is a disputed question. Some say that the state has done a certain act. Others, no, not the state, but the oligarchy or the tyrant. And the legislator or statesman is concerned entirely with the state, a constitution or government being an arrangement of the inhabitants of a state. But a state is composite, like any other whole made up of many parts. These are the citizens who compose it. It is evident, therefore, that we must begin by asking, who is the citizen? And what is the meaning of the term? For here again, there may be a difference of opinion. He who is a citizen in a democracy will often not be a citizen in an oligarchy. Leaving out of consideration those who have been made citizens, or who have obtained the name of citizen in any other accidental manner, we may say, first, that a citizen is not a citizen because he lives in a certain place, for resident aliens and slaves share in that place. Nor is he a citizen who has no legal right except that of suing and being sued, for this may be enjoyed under the provisions of a treaty. Nay, resident aliens in many places do not possess even such rights completely, for they are obliged to have a patron, so that they do but imperfectly participate in citizenship. And we call them citizens only in a qualified sense, as we might apply the term to children who are too young to be on the register, or to old men who have been relieved from state duties. He who has the power to take part in the deliberative or judicial administration of any state is said by us to be a citizen of that state. And, speaking generally, a state is a body of citizens sufficing for the purposes of life. Part 4. There is a point nearly allied to the preceding, whether the virtue of a good man and a good citizen is the same or not. But, before entering on this discussion, we must certainly first obtain some general notion of the virtue of the citizen. Like the sailor, the citizen is a member of a community. Now, sailors have different functions. For one of them is a rower, another a pilot, and a third a lookout man. A fourth is described by some similar term. And while the precise definition of each individual's virtue applies exclusively to him, there is, at the same time, a common definition applicable to them all. For they have all of them a common object, which is safety in navigation. Similarly, one citizen differs from another, but the salvation of the community is the common business of them all. This community is the constitution. The virtue of the citizen must therefore be relative to the constitution of which he is a member. If, then, there are many forms of government, it is evident that there is not a single virtue of the good citizen which is perfect virtue. But we say that the good man is he who has one single virtue which is perfect virtue. Hence, it is evident that the good citizen need not of necessity possess the virtue which makes a good man. Part 6. Having determined these questions, we have next to consider whether there is only one form of government or many, and if many, what they are, and how many, and what are the differences between them. A constitution is the arrangement of magistracies in the state, especially of the highest of all. The government is everywhere sovereign in the state, and the constitution is in fact the government. For example, in democracies, the people are supreme, but in oligarchies, the few, and therefore we say that these two forms of government are also different, and so in other cases. First, Let us consider what is the purpose of a state and how many forms of government there are by which human society is regulated. We have already said in the first part of this treatise, when discussing household management and the rule of a master, that man is by nature a political animal. And therefore, men, even when they do not require one another's help, desire to live together. Not but that they are also brought together by their common interests in proportion as they severally attain to any measure of well being. This is certainly the chief end, both of individuals and of states. The conclusion is evident that governments which have a regard to the common interest are constituted in accordance with strict principles of justice and are therefore true forms. But those which regard only the interest of the rulers are of defective and perverted forms, for they are despotic, whereas a state is a community of free men. Part 7. Having determined these points, we have next to consider how many forms of government there are and what they are. And in the first place, what are the true forms? For when they are determined, the perversions of them will at once be apparent. The words constitution and government have the same meaning, and the government, which is the supreme authority in states, must be in the hands of one, or of a few, or of the many. The true forms of government, therefore, are those in which the one, or the few, or the many govern with a view to the common interest. But governments which rule with a view to the private interest, whether of the one or the few or of the many, are perversions. For the members of a state, if they are truly citizens, ought to participate in its advantages. Of forms of government in which one rules, we call that which regards the common interests kingship or royalty. That in which more than one, but not many, rule, aristocracy. And it is so called either because the rulers are the best men, or because they have at heart the best interests of the state and of the citizens. But when the citizens at large administer the state for the common interest, the government is called by the generic name a constitution. And there is a reason for this use of language. One man or a few may excel in virtue, but as the number increases, it becomes more difficult for them to attain perfection in every kind of virtue, though they may in military virtue, for this is found in the masses. Hence, in a constitutional government, the fighting men have the supreme power, and those who possess arms are the citizens. Of the above mentioned forms, the perversions are as follows: of royalty, tyranny; of aristocracy, oligarchy; of constitutional government, democracy. For tyranny is a kind of monarchy which has in view the interest of the monarch only. Oligarchy has in view the interest of the wealthy. Democracy of the needy. None of them the common good of all. Part 9. Our conclusion, then, is that political society exists for the sake of noble actions, and not of mere companionship. Hence, they who contribute most to such a society have a greater share in it than those who have the same or a greater freedom or nobility of birth, but are inferior to them in political virtue, or than those who exceed them in wealth, but are surpassed by them in virtue. From what has been said, it will be clearly seen that all the partisans of different forms of government speak of a part of justice only. Part 10. There's also a doubt as to what is to be the supreme power in the state. Is it the multitude, or the wealthy, or the good, or the one best man, or a tyrant? Any of these alternatives seem to involve disagreeable consequences. If the poor, for example, because they are more in number, divide among themselves the property of the rich, is not this unjust? No, by heaven, will be the reply, for the supreme authority justly willed it. But if this is not injustice, pray what is? Again, when the first division all has been taken, and the majority divide anew the property of the minority, is it not evident, if this goes on, that they will ruin the state? Yet surely virtue is not the ruin of those who possess her, nor is justice destruction of a state. Therefore, this law of confiscation clearly cannot be just. If it were, all the acts of a tyrant must of necessity be just, for he only coerces other men by superior power, just as the multitude coerce the rich. But is it just, then, that the few and the wealthy should be the rulers? And what if they, in like manner, rob and plunder the people? Is this just? If so, the other case will likewise be just. But there can be no doubt that all these things are wrong and unjust. Then ought the good to rule and have supreme power. But in that case, everybody else, being excluded from power, will be dishonored. For the offices of a state are posts of honor, and if one set of men always holds them, the rest must be deprived of them. Then, will it be well that the one best man should rule? Nay, that is still more oligarchical, for the number of those who are dishonored is thereby increased. Someone may say that it is bad in any case for a man, subject as he is to all the accidents of human passion, to have the supreme power rather than the law. But what if the law itself be democratical or oligarchical? How will that help us out of our difficulties? Not at all. The same consequences will follow. If you want to see more of this, please go to the website that is on your text, MIT's Internet Classics Archive.